The strange part about this situation isn't that Rory McIlroy isn't playing this week. It's that his absence doesn't feel shocking anymore. And that's a shift that happened quietly without anyone really pointing it out. A few years ago, if a player like Rory wasn't in the field for a major PGA Tour event, it would immediately dominate the conversation. It would feel like something was wrong. Now, it gets noticed, discussed briefly, and then the tournament moves on. That change in reaction is where the real story begins, because it tells you something about how the structure of the tour is actually functioning right now. The Cadillac Championship at Trump National Doral was supposed to be one of those events that brings everything together. A signature event, a massive prize pool, a limited field, and most importantly, a format designed to make sure the biggest names in golf are competing in the same place at the same time. That's not accidental. These events were created for a reason. The PGA Tour needed a way to keep its top players visible, engaged, and consistently matched up, especially with everything that has been happening around the sport over the past few years. On paper, it works perfectly. But when you look at what's actually happening, it starts to feel less controlled than it's supposed to be. Rory choosing not to play this event doesn't come out of nowhere, and that's what makes it more interesting. It follows immediately after he also missed the RBC Heritage, another signature event, which turns this from a one-off decision into something that feels more intentional. Not dramatic, not controversial, just deliberate. One skipped event can be explained easily. Players manage their schedules all the time. But two in a row, especially at this level, starts to suggest a different kind of approach. It's no longer about rest or timing in isolation. It becomes a pattern, and patterns are what change perception. From Rory's perspective, the decision makes sense. He's at a stage in his career where he doesn't need to prove anything through volume. He doesn't need to play every big event to validate his position in the game. After winning the Masters, his entire season shifts. The focus moves from building momentum to maintaining it, from playing often to playing precisely. That's how elite players extend their peak. They choose their moments instead of chasing them. But here's where the situation becomes complicated. These signature events were specifically designed to exist above that kind of decision-making. They were meant to be the tournaments players don't step around, the ones that define the season rather than fit into it. And that's why this doesn't feel like a Rory story anymore. It feels like a system being tested. Because when a system is working exactly the way it's designed, individual choices don't stand out like this. They blend into the structure. But when those choices start to sit outside of it, even slightly, it creates a gap between what the tour is trying to build and how players are actually behaving within it. That gap isn't loud, and it isn't being presented as a problem, but it's there, and it becomes more visible every time something like this happens. What makes it even more noticeable is that Rory isn't just another player operating independently. He's been deeply connected to the PGA Tour's direction during one of its most important periods. He's been vocal, involved, and aligned with the idea of strengthening the tour's identity. So when someone like that moves slightly outside the structure, it doesn't create controversy, but it does create a question. Not about his commitment, but about how the structure itself is holding up under real conditions. At the same time, this isn't happening in isolation. There's been a growing sense that participation across these signature events isn't as consistent as it was supposed to be. Not chaotic, not broken, but not perfectly aligned either. And for fans, that's where the difference shows up first. Because the expectation is simple. Big event means big names. That's what builds anticipation. That's what creates engagement. And that's what makes these tournaments feel important beyond the prize money. When that expectation isn't fully met, even quietly, it changes how the event feels. The tournament will still have top players. It will still deliver high-level golf. But something about it feels slightly incomplete, and that's not something you fix with format or structure. That comes from who is actually there. Golf, more than most sports, still revolves around individual presence. The matchups, the rivalries, the feeling of watching the best compete directly against each other. That's what these events are supposed to guarantee. And when that guarantee starts to feel flexible, even a little, it shifts the entire dynamic. Now, the bigger question starts to form. What are these signature events actually becoming? Are they the center of the season, the tournaments players build around, or are they still optional within a broader strategy? Because right now, they seem to exist somewhere in between, and that's a difficult position to maintain. If players continue to treat them as flexible, the structure loses some of its purpose. If the tour wants them to be essential, then something eventually has to adjust to bring those expectations back into alignment. This is where Rory's decision becomes important, not because of the decision itself, but because of what it represents. It shows that even at the highest level, with the most carefully designed structure in place, players are still operating based on their own priorities first. That's not new in golf, but the system was supposed to reduce that gap, not highlight it. And now, that gap is becoming easier to see. What happens next is what really matters. If this stays isolated, it fades into the background. But if more players start approaching these events the same way, then it becomes something the PGA Tour has to address directly. Not through statements, but through structure. Because at that point, it's no longer about one player managing his schedule. It's about how the entire system functions under pressure. Right now, it doesn't feel broken. It doesn't feel like a problem that needs immediate fixing. But it does feel like something that's starting to shift, slowly, quietly, without being announced. And those are usually the changes that matter the most, because by the time they become obvious, they've already taken hold.